You're listening to Sorry.
Today will be mostly sunny and pleasant, high of 80. Degree that.
You're listening.
당신은 지금 듣고 있습니다.
Вы слушаете.
Estás escuchando.
Unasikiliza.
To GPSG Radio.
From the Indiana University.
El equipo de gobierno de los estudiantes graduados.
Graduate and Professional Student Government.
Broadcasting from Bloomington, Indiana, you're listening to GPSG Radio, the podcast for Indiana University's graduate and professional student government. I'm Rick Brewer. Each week, GPSG Radio brings you the latest GPSG news, as well as interviews and stories from around campus and helping all grad students navigate life in Bloomington. Today in episode 9, we're back with our Bloomington Foodie reviews, as you'll hear from David Fletcher, owner and executive pastry chef of Blue Boy Chocolate Cafe and Cakery.
But we buy chocolate from really around the world, and I blend it to my specifications.
And of course, our student spotlight. Each week, GPSG Radio features conversations with graduate and professional students from across the Bloomington campus. And this week, you'll hear from Aaron Ellis, a PhD student in anthropology, studying craft breweries.
The best things about living in Bloomington for me is, besides all the breweries, and then there's now a distillery and a meadery, and so there's a lot of alcohol things happening. That kind of creative craft alcohol spirit is something I love.
And we end our program with our Song of the Week. Today, you'll hear a piece of music written in 1879 by Gabriel Faure, titled Les Secrets, Opus 23, No. 3, performed by Krista Schaarschmidt and Nicole DiPaolo, both graduate students at the Jacobs School of Music. But first, it's Shay with the news.
Thanks, Rick. This is Shay, back with the news. And this week we have 2 GPSG events that you want to be sure to attend. Thursday in GISB 1060, we have networking and dessert, where you can stop by, have some great conversations, and some tasty morsels from noon to 1:30. That's on this Thursday. The very next day, Friday night, it is GPSG night at IMU's Wittenberger Auditorium. We're going to be viewing Girls Trip starting at 9 p.m. We'll catch you there at both events.
David Fletcher is the owner and executive pastry chef of Blue Boy Chocolate Cafe and Cakery. And in this interview, you'll learn about how Blue Boy came to be and the variety of chocolates and desserts the shop offers. I heard about you through word of mouth saying you got to try their chocolate. Maybe talk about some of your specialty items that you have here.
Sure. The chocolate really has always been a focus of mine in kind of creating the business. I wanted to, craft what we made by hand. And for me, I'm a physician by training. I still practice medicine, but I took a little time off to open Blue Boy. And so it has this combination, the chocolate has this combination of kind of the science of food. It requires some skill and knowledge to execute it well. It requires some creativity, from a visual standpoint. I like to think that the chocolates are unique in that way. Certainly for Bloomington, they are. But also it's got this, I think chocolate has this kind of sexy, sensual quality that we all really relate to, unless you've grown up in, in the middle of the desert maybe. Everyone has some familiarity with chocolate, and so I like the idea that all those things can kind of be present in the same thing.
do you make your own recipes with chocolate? Do you sort of, like you mentioned you're a physician, so are you sort of maybe always sort of in the lab per se, or thinking of new combinations for recipes and things like that?
Yeah, definitely. The chocolate that we don't make it from the bean, right? We don't roast the beans, we don't grind them and process them, but we buy chocolate from really around the world, and I blend it to my specifications. That's kind of the base formula that we make the shells from. And then the fillings are all about being creative and having fun. So for me, that is where actually the science kind of meets the creative process. And I really like to tell people it's kind of like it's like, for me, it's like making a playlist. Like it's all the important things to me. If I'm referring to music, but in terms of chocolate, it's the things that matter to me and I find valuable that I put together and I present it to the people who come in, and I hope they like it, right? It means a lot to me, and hopefully they like it enough to buy it, and are happy with it. So that is really the kind of biggest creative component of what we do here.
Obviously, you have much more than just chocolate. Talk about some of the other items that you have here.
So I've never really thought myself very clever in terms of being a business person. But one thing that we did, I think, from the start, that was a great idea, is that we do basically 4 things here. We make the chocolate, we do pastries and cakes, we do espresso-based drinks, and we make ice cream. And those 4 things really in combination have allowed us to stay present in Bloomington, because the market for each of those things fluctuates a little bit throughout the year. There's the big chocolate holidays, there's the ice cream in summer, there's the hot drinks in winter, and then celebrations throughout the year for things like cakes. So those 4 things make up the entirety of what we do.
Why do you think graduate students would like coming to Blue Boy?
Well, I would say we probably have, just as part of Bloomington, we have a wide clientele. We have a lot of actually high school students that come in, which surprised me, in fact, and certainly undergrad students make their way down here. But in terms of students and the kind of Bloomington transient community, I would say graduate students make up the majority of that. And I think it must have to do with how hard they work and just wanting something special. Because we'll see people come in, on dates, or they'll come in the middle of the afternoon for a little kind of respite, just to, I think, kind of get away from the day to day. I always tell people we make cookies, right? I mean, basically, we make cookies. I think they're really good cookies, but they're just cookies in the end. And so how do you present those in a way that is appealing beyond just the cookie? So I think the atmosphere is nice. It's pretty quaint and cute, I think. And I think it's a nice little place to go, to get away from the day to day.
What is the best part about owning a business in Bloomington?
So I have to go back to the whole community aspect of that. And I think the best example I have of that is we had a college professor who began to bring in his daughter every Saturday, and for a short period of time, 15, 20 minutes that they were sitting in here, he would have a coffee and she would have a cookie. And I didn't notice them initially, but then the staff pointed out that these 2 individuals were coming, and the father and the daughter were coming in on a regular basis, and I eventually learned more about this professor, who was very busy, very well known in his field. But I got to see for those 15 minutes this father take time out for his daughter, and she had his full attention for that time period. And in that moment of that realization, I thought, man, this actually is really a great part of the business that I never even considered. Again, I thought we'd make cookies and chocolate and ice cream, and the whole idea of kind of creating, or at least maybe contributing to experiences that ultimately become kind of food memories. That's been, I would say, the most satisfying thing of what we do. it's pretty hard otherwise actually to own a scratch business in a small town in Indiana, and certainly that's a challenge. But the kind of community aspect has been really rewarding.
David Fletcher, owner and executive pastry chef of Blue Boy Chocolate Cafe and Cakery. Still to come in this episode of GPSG Radio, our Song of the Week from Krista Schaarschmidt and Nicole DiPaolo. But right now, it's our student spotlight with the PhD student in anthropology, Aaron Ellis, whose research interest lies in craft breweries and their online communities. He is Aaron Ellis, a PhD candidate in the Department of Anthropology here at IU Bloomington, and is writing his dissertation on craft beer and home breweries. As an undergraduate, Aaron traveled the country visiting breweries and brewers as part of his senior thesis. So Aaron, why the academic side of beer and breweries?
So pretty much I started this project as an undergrad. I was just kind of interested in craft beer and why everyone was really excited about it. I was in a fraternity and had a lot of brothers who were starting to drink a lot of craft beer. So I needed a project, and my advisor sort of knew that was my big passion in life, was getting people to drink great beer. So he suggested that I should try to make this into something more academic and worthwhile, I think.
What are people's reactions when you tell them your research topic?
From the public, people are really excited.
Okay.
And they think it's funny. Maybe they don't see how it relates to broader things in life, so class or gentrification or urban renewal, things like that. Academics, they're maybe incredulous, and then after that, they get really excited because I've done a lot of work to figure out how to make this a viable project. I think it's usually a positive feedback from people.
What is the main focus in your research? What are you exactly looking for when it comes to craft beer and breweries?
I look at online communities, kind of majority. It's a lot of how people accumulate the knowledge to go from being a hobbyist to being a professional, since there's only a handful of schools in the world that really teach how to brew professionally and on a large industrial scale. Most of this knowledge is just being produced online and spread through friends or blogs or forums, things like that. A lot of the knowledge is also pseudoscientific. It's maybe there's a lot of experimentation in the home brewing scene, and then that knowledge gets reproduced in industrial production, which is not something you see a lot of in kind of other businesses.
What are some of your early findings?
The online communities they're really welcoming. They're really they're a great group of mostly guys that spend a lot of time and a lot of money on this hobby. It ends up being really rigorous, I guess, is something that is sort of surprising to a lot of people. So you can conduct an experiment maybe in your backyard, or you have dozens of friends doing the same experiment, and then you send out these results to 100,000, 200,000 basically peer reviewers who are going to tear apart your scientific process, who are going to tear apart the assumptions that you made, and to make this a better thing. So it's actually really rigorous.
Have you got to make any beer yourself while you've been traveling?
Yeah, absolutely. I started home brewing again in my fraternity with my brothers, just as like a brotherhood event, and then got really passionate about it. Ended up doing a season in England making cider, learning a ton about fermentation and kind of general beer and cider making. Came back to the United States, kept going with this project, and now I brew about once a month.
Really? Where do you brew at?
At my house.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. What attracted you to come to IU and graduate school in particular?
Yeah, so the project, when I finished it in undergrad, just kind of didn't have a great resolution. I felt like there's a lot more happening in craft beer, starting to pick up. I graduated in 2015, so there's a lot more breweries opening up. So at that point, there was about 2,000 breweries in the United States, and now there's about 5,000 breweries in the United States. So I sort of knew that this was going to continue to be interesting, and going to be a lot of growth in the craft beer sector. So I wanted to follow this project through. I wanted to go to grad school to follow that. I came to IU specifically to work at the Food Institute, which is a interdisciplinary on-campus group of scholars who work on anything sort of related to food sovereignty, food justice, yeah, there's already this infrastructure of great food scholars here who want to keep pursuing this project and other projects like it. So IU was a really good fit for me, I think.
So when you're not brewing beer or doing your research, what else can I find you doing?
So I'm drinking a lot of beer and making a lot of beer, talking about beer to a lot of people. One of the things that I've started taking up since I moved to Bloomington, I've lived in a house the whole time. I've started growing hops and growing ingredients to put into my beer and to start kind of playing around with other flavors. I'm originally from Northern California, and one of these kind of really distinct memories I have is picking blackberries in the summer, in the really, really hot summer. So I'm trying to recreate a beer like that, like my childhood sort of thing like that. So
what's your go-to beer then?
From the store?
Yeah, we'll go store for now, and then you can follow up with maybe your own personal favorite.
Yeah, from the store recently, I think I've been drinking. It's a Founder's Stout. I can't even think of what it's called right now.
Okay.
But so I've been drinking that a lot. Or All Day IPA, which is another Founder's beer. I like those a lot. But the beer style and kind of thing I drink the most is, it's called a New England IPA. It's a new style. I'm one of the first people to start writing about it. It's a less bitter, more hoppy beer. Really, really cloudy and intensely aromatic. And so I've been messing with a recipe for about a year now, trying to make a perfect one. But I drink those all the time.
I have a beer question now for you. Now that obviously you're very knowledgeable, but why is it called IPA? I know it's called Indian Pale Ale, but where does that name come from?
No one's 100% sure, but the story goes, beer spoils relatively easily, and so they're making beers in England and sending them across to India during colonization. By the time they got there, they were completely spoiled, oxidized, and they didn't really taste like much. So the brewers in England got kind of fed up with this, and they just started dumping hops into the beer, which have an antioxidant property. So by the time the beer got to India, they were still shelf stable and able to be drunk. The story goes, one of those casks fell off the boat. Somebody in England drank it fresh, and it was incredibly bitter, incredibly hoppy, but it was really popular, and people started drinking it from then on.
Oh, okay. I've always wondered about that story. Yeah. Now, in Bloomington, we have a lot of great places to eat, a lot of great beer, but if you want a beer with a good meal, what's a great restaurant you go to?
I'm a big Function fan, especially the deals on Sunday where you get a sandwich and a beer for like $13 or something like that. So I think they've got some cool rotating taps, and I really like it there.
Now, your favorite brewery or place to get beer here in town? This is a pretty big statement now because you are the beer expert.
Yeah. Maybe I would say probably Quaffon Bigwoods.
Okay.
So they've got their kind of normal standard things, and then they've also got outside breweries that come in. So maybe that's a cop-out answer, but I like it there.
Oh, yeah. I've been there a few times. I love their menu, and
yeah, they
do have a lot of great selections. Now, final question, Aaron. What do you think makes Bloomington a great place to live?
Yeah, so one of the best things about living in Bloomington for me is, besides all the breweries, and then there's now a distillery and a meadery, and so there's a lot of alcohol things happening. That kind of creative craft alcohol spirit is something I love. I go out probably more than I should, I guess, as a grad student, but it's I talk to my friends in other cities, and they don't have as much diversity in drinking and as going out and socializing, and this kind of extra space that you can just go hang out and have a drink and spend time with friends is amazing. I love that.
Well, Aaron, thanks so much for coming on GPSG Radio. We hope to see you at some GPSG events this year.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks.
Aaron Ellis, a PhD student from the Department of Anthropology. That about does it for this 9th edition of GPSG Radio. But before we get to our song of the week, I'm proud to announce that GPSG Radio has added another assistant producer, Enos Nassar, a PhD student from the Department of Near Eastern Languages and Cultures. Say hi, Enos.
Hello, everyone.
Tell our listeners a little bit about your plans for the show.
So, as an international student from Egypt, I'm probably will be interested in bringing stories from other international students and to know more about their lifestyle here in the U.S. and their how they're adapting in the IU community and Bloomington community.
Excellent. Well, we're really proud to have you and welcome aboard.
Thanks.
GPSG Radio is produced and hosted by me, Rick Brewer, with help from co-producers Schaarschmidt, Eunice Nassar, and composer Craig Davis. Don't forget to subscribe to GPSG Radio on your preferred podcast app to receive weekly automatic downloads. New episodes published every Tuesday. And now I give you Gabriel Faure's Les Secrets, Opus 23 No. 3, performed by Krista Schaarschmidt and Nicole DiPaolo.